A researcher at Stanford University named Carol Dweck wrote in her book called Mindsets that our limits are unknown and unknowable. Now, while it's true that our limits are unknown and unknowable, we only have a certain number of hours in the day, a certain number of days in the year, a certain number of years in our life, which means that we are in a place where we will need to make choices. And the choices we make are impactful. One way that we can impact our future is by thinking about our values now. Now, when I talk about values, I want to clarify what I mean. What I'm talking about when I say our core values, I'm talking about the ways in which you have been created, the ways in which your experiences have come together in who you are. And it's the things that excite you. It's the things that get you excited about waking up in the morning and going and seeking these values. And I hope that will make more sense in a moment. I'm going to show you two activities. The first activity is going to be one where you are identifying 10 of your core values. And what this kind of introspection can do is it can help you to better understand the things that you are passionate about, the things that you seek, the things that you want to seek. It helps you to make decisions in time about where you're going to spend your energy so that you can better stretch your limits and you can have a greater impact right where you are. Now, in this first activity, the goal is to identify 10 of your core values. For some, you're going to see this list of about 50 values, and you're going to be able to identify 25 as things that you really think are important to you. And so the challenge for you is to pare that down, to winnow it down to your top 10. And that's going to require a lot of introspection on your part. It's going to ask you to make difficult choices. You're going to have to leave some off of your list. But in going through that process, that thought process that you have is going to bring new understanding to you about you. And on the other end, you might only be able to identify 3 or 4 core values. I want to challenge you to see if you can find up to 10 values. And here's what I recommend. I recommend the first time you go through this list, checking off the things, any things, don't count. Just check off the ones that you think are most true about you, which I've done here. And here you can see that I selected 22 in my first round. I'm in the place now where I have to make the difficult decisions. I have to choose between peace and inner peace, or between learning and wisdom, or between love and faith to be in my top 10. Now, I want to be clear. By choosing wisdom and not peace, that doesn't mean that peace isn't something that you value. It's just not as core to who you are right now. And that's okay. We're all made differently. The second time you go through it, pare it down to your top 10. And as you do this, I want you to start developing the habit of thinking about your thinking. Once you've identified your 10 values, I recommend taking some time and thinking them through. Finding somebody that you can talk about these values with them. Let them ask you questions. The truth is, this activity, while it's great and it can feel really good to go through and really think about these ideas, if you don't do the work afterwards, if you don't give yourself time to sit and think about why you made the choices you did, and even better, to sit down with somebody, to sit down with a mentor or to sit down with a friend and talk about, hey, these are the things that I came up with. And I know that that is a hard thing to do. It is a difficult thing to do, especially at a younger age. To sit down next to somebody or over the phone with somebody and say, hey, can we talk about those core values that we went over? I want to encourage you to step into that, to lead into that conversation. The deeper you go, the more work you put in, the more you will get out of this activity. This next activity builds off the first. The objective of this activity is to take your core values and narrow them down even further so that you have your top 3 or 4 values. The first thing I've done here in order to think through my values a little more deeply is that I've written them along the side and across the top. The only thing to keep in mind here is that value 1 needs to stay value 1 down the side and across the top. So here, value 1 is authenticity, value 2 is compassion, value 3 is creativity, and so on. Now, I'm going to go through and I'm going to think about each of these values in comparison with another one. And I'm going to make decisions. I'm going to choose either one value or the other. Let me show you what I mean by that. First, I'm going to be thinking about authenticity and compassion. And I need to make a choice. Which of those values is more important to me? Is it authenticity or compassion? If it's authenticity, I'll write a 1 in this box. If it's compassion, I'll write a 2. Now I'm thinking about creativity and authenticity. Which is more important to me? And in this case, for me, authenticity is more important than creativity. So I'm going to mark it as a 1. Faith is more core to who I am than the value of authenticity. So I'm going to write a 4. And I'm going to continue this process looking at just 2 values at a time. Now I'm going to compare compassion to all of the other values. And so on. Once I've filled out all of my values, now I want to go through and count them. So I'm looking for every time I chose number 1, value 1, authenticity. And here, I chose it 3 times. Now I'm looking for value 2. How many times did I select value 2? 1, 2, 3, 3 times. And I'll do the same for all 10 of these values. Once I've done that, I'm going to take my 10 values and list them from the most common, in this case, wisdom, to the least common. And as I went through and I made this list, I had to make a couple of choices. You can see that my second most common choice was 7 times, and that was a tie between faith and inner peace. And I had to make a decision again. And you might notice that the decision I made in my final list is actually different than the one I made up above. And that's okay. So long as I'm thinking about why I made that choice and I'm able to have a conversation about that, or at least start a conversation about that, that's fine. Just like in our last activity, perhaps the most important thing that you can do right now is to write about what you were thinking, write about the decisions you made, and then talk to somebody and give them permission to ask you questions. It's possible that when you look at this list, maybe it feels exactly right. It feels like, yeah, of course, these are the things that are true about me. For some, there might be surprises. There are things in this list that maybe don't feel exactly right. Well, what is it about that that doesn't feel right? Explore that. Explore that thought. Explore that feeling. Because when you do, you will get to know yourself even better. Really, the objective here is not to make a list of things that describe you. The goal of this activity is to give you an opportunity to think deeply about who you are and how you've been made. And the way you do that is by thinking deeply about the choices that you've made. So, I want to encourage you to take some time, write down your thoughts. Do the hard thing of starting a conversation with somebody and say, hey, can we talk about your 5 core values? What was surprising to you? When you start this conversation, I want to encourage you to do a couple things. First, try to avoid the question why. Why as a question can feel to some like there's a judgment that comes along with that. Why did you do that? Well, I don't know. a person might become defensive. Instead, ask the other question words. What about that made you choose that value? How do you see that value showing up in your life now? Where do you go to fulfill that value? Who can help you seek out that value? Again, the deeper you can go, the more questions you either ask yourself or you allow somebody to ask of you, the more value you will get from this activity. And then, as a final thought, take these with you. Write them down, put them up next to a mirror or on your breakfast table in the morning. And for the next week, think about them. Ask yourself those questions again and again. What is it about that is important to me? How can I honor that value? Who can help me? Where can I go to make sure this is a value that is honored? I hope that you enjoyed this activity, and more than enjoyed it, I actually hope that you learned more about yourself, because you have been created uniquely. You are you, and we need you and who you are and how you've been made in order to make this world a better place. It really is a true thing when we say we need you. We need your voice. We need your passion. We need your values expressed in order to make this world the best place it can be.